The Sutra of Vajra Chapter 9, Where the Winds Meet. Kyoheim gripped Adamus's hand tightly as they sprinted through the labyrinth of prison corridors, chaos erupting around them. Prisoners broke free of their cells, joining the frantic escape. Kyoheim's mind, however, was elsewhere. A distant memory resurfaced, a prophecy foretold by a sage, whispering of a warrior with golden eyes, his body aflame with power, who would offer her the keys to a world of infinite possibilities. Around them, pig-like guards armed with heavy machinery and high-tech laser rifles opened fire on the fleeing prisoners. Screams echoed through the halls as some prisoners were hit, collapsing as their limbs were torn apart by the brutal weapons. Adamus and Kyoheim, however, moved with fluid grace, evading each shot as if they had rehearsed it 1,000 times. They burst through the final gate, emerging into the blinding light of the outside world. A massive open field stretched before them, but waiting at the exit were colossal robots, piloted by pig guards. Tanks rolled forward, their guns aimed directly at the escapees. Adamus, unfazed, shouted to the remaining prisoners, his voice carrying over the battlefield. "We're almost there. The portal to our realm is just beyond the city." But before anyone could take another step, the air was pierced by the mechanical hum of an approaching hovercraft. Hovering above them, a pig dressed in a general's uniform had tilted arrogantly, sneered down at the scene. "You inmates aren't going anywhere," the general declared, his voice crackling with authority through the speakers. The massive robots raised their weapons, preparing to strike. The pig general scowled, watching the chaos unfold below. "These prison guards better not screw this up," he muttered, gripping the edge of his control panel. "They don't realize what's at stake." His eyes darted to the horizon, where the inmates fought back with their powers, sending the battlefield into further disarray. He glanced down at his polished, expensive watch, a gift from the grid. The irony of it wasn't lost on him as he shifted his gaze beyond the prison's towering walls toward his country's cities in the distance. Mud huts, barely standing, lined the streets, primitive, powerless. Meanwhile, the prison and military bases around them gleamed with high-tech weapons and cutting-edge factories, all courtesy of the grid. "This wasn't just any prison," he muttered. "These prisoners aren't just criminals." His mind flashed back to the day he signed the contract, seated at a long table with grid officials. The ink had barely dried on the paper when they promised him riches beyond imagination, technology far superior to anything his country had ever seen, and military strength to rival any of their neighbors. Factories and bases would spring up across the land, technological marvels, in exchange for his loyalty. He remembered the weight of the pen as he signed away his nation's autonomy. A puppet state, he whispered to himself, bitterness creeping into his voice. On the surface, this was just a prison. But it was so much more a gateway, a secret outpost for the grid to access other realms. They'd supplied him with everything: power, weapons, resources, and in return, his country became their foothold. His people were oblivious, thinking the new wealth came from him, not realizing they had become pawns in a much larger game. He clenched his fists. If these prisoners escape and reach the portal, if they return to their realm, I'll lose everything. He glanced at his watch again, the gold a reminder of the promise of riches and power. The grid will strip it all away, the wealth, my position. They'll turn me over to the king, and he'll make sure my entire family pays for this failure. The panic was rising. "I won't let that happen. I'll go to the other base, shut down the teleporter myself if I have to. No one escapes, not while I'm in charge." He activated his hovercraft and sped off, determined to protect the one thing that mattered most: his power. On the battlefield, Kyoheim found herself encircled by 5 pig guards operating heavy robot machines. Lasers shot out from all directions, but she moved with blinding speed, her sword slicing through the beams with precision. Each laser was reflected back at the pig guards, their machines exploding into fiery wrecks as she cut through metal and flesh alike. She pressed on, determined to clear a path and continue the fight. Adamus was locked in a fierce battle of his own. Each punch he threw cracked through metal and flesh alike, sending pig guards and their towering robotic enforcers flying across the battlefield like ragdolls in a storm. Sparks flew and mechanical groans echoed through the smoke-filled air. He landed with a crunch, face to face with one of the robots, a massive, reinforced unit, piloted from within by a snarling, pig-faced commander. Its glass dome reflected Adamus's golden eyes just before the machine lunged. Adamus sidestepped in a flash, his body a blur of momentum and precision. As the robot stumbled past, he extended his fingers. Threads of golden light, his life strings shot out, weaving through the air like living wires. Narrow nerve sync. The life strings danced through the battlefield and latched onto 2 of the enemy's high-tech laser rifles, discarded in the chaos. The weapons floated midair, trembling. Adamus pulsed his will through the threads. "Stay alive," he commanded silently. The guns twitched, then sparked with a strange awareness. With no hands to hold them, they turned in the air and took aim at their former master. They fired in unison, beams of blue energy piercing through the robot's torso. The machine crumbled to its knees, smoke rising from its chest plate. The pig pilot, though injured, was thrown free alive, but stunned. And then Adamus spread his life strings out even further, grasping at the fallen weapons scattered across the field. One by one, rifles, pistols, and blades jerked upright, their steel and plasma cores trembling with new vitality. They whirled, took aim, and opened fire on the guards still charging forward, turning the very tools of war against their wielders, fighting now on his behalf. Before Adamus could act again, another mech stormed in from behind. This one was faster. It wrapped Adamus in a crushing bear hug, its massive arms locking tight. He gritted his teeth, releasing the life strings from the floating guns. They dropped lifelessly to the ground. Instead, he sent the golden threads into the machine, restraining him directly into its inner neural core. The robot jerked. Then froze. The grip around him loosened. With a dull whine, the machine powered down, and the pig inside frantically bashed at the controls, confused and terrified. Adamus dropped lightly to the floor. He turned. "Kyoheim," he called out, scanning through the chaos. She was locked in her own skirmish nearby, dragon fire swirling around her like a serpent's waltz. He blurred forward in a streak of light and momentum, skidding beside her. "We need to get to the teleporter," he said urgently, eyes blazing with intensity. It's our only way home. Before they could move, a massive robot loomed behind them, preparing to deliver a devastating punch. Just as it was about to strike, a sharp slash of water sliced through the robot, cleaving it in half. Nathan Hunter appeared, wielding a blade of pure water. He gave them a brief, assessing look before spreading his wings and taking off into the sky. Adamus glanced at Kyoheim. He doesn't seem to be a threat. Come on, let's follow him. He might know the way. With a nod, they sprinted toward the city, prisoners following close behind. The chaos of battle faded into the distance, replaced by the eerie stillness of wastelands and ruined towns. Among them was Suvico, a burly figure whose eyes burned with determination. His crew of pig people, scarred yet resolute, moved with purpose. Each one had their own home, their own family waiting for them, a fragment of hope that had kept them alive through years of imprisonment. As they reached the outskirts of the city, the group dispersed, each heading toward their old homes. Suvico clutched a battered pistol in his hand, the weight of it both a comfort and a reminder of what he'd endured. His thoughts raced as his pace quickened. I'm free. Finally free. I can see my son again. My wife. He swallowed hard, steeling himself against the wave of emotion. I can fix this. I have to. The streets of Obaporka were alive with muted activity, citizens too accustomed to their oppression to notice the returning fugitives. Suvico slipped through the shadows, his heart pounding as he neared the familiar alleyway that led to his home. The thought of his son waiting there pushed him forward, but a flicker of doubt nagged at him. After all these years, will they even recognize me? Can be skipped. Narrator. Meanwhile, as the escape plan unfolded in one part of the country, life continued in another, a life marked by the same grinding oppression and quiet desperation. In this part of Obaporka, there was a young boy named Suvico. Not the rebel leading prisoners to freedom, but an ordinary citizen, growing up under the crushing weight of a government that dictated every aspect of life. End of narration. A young pig boy trudged through the dirt streets of Obaporka, his ragged clothes barely clinging to his thin frame. The city was a patchwork of mud huts and dust, its air heavy with the acrid smell of smoke and despair. The breadlines stretched endlessly before him, a somber procession of the weary and the hungry. But today, Suvico wore a rare smile. He stood in line, his hooves dusted with the dry earth beneath him, clutching a handful of coins earned from endless hours in the factory. The machines he built cold, lifeless robots felt like the very hands of the regime crushing his spirit. Yet this week, the toil had paid off. I did it, Suvico whispered, his tail twitching with excitement. I worked hard, and now we're going to eat like kings and queens. He chuckled softly to himself, the thought of sharing real food with his mother filling him with joy. When his turn came, the army personnel in their dark uniforms wordlessly handed him a small sack of rations. The soldier didn't even look at him, their eyes hidden behind reflective visors. Suvico clutched the bag tightly, its weight a promise of relief after days of gnawing hunger. As he stepped out of line, his hooves moved lightly over the dirt path, his heart soaring. Finally, my mom can eat tonight, he muttered under his breath. She won't have to drink that mud water again. Not this week. Turning a corner toward home, he didn't see the soldier until it was too late. The armored figure loomed over him, gleaming high-tech plating stark against the backdrop of poverty. The collision sent Javali sprawling to the ground, the sack of food slipping from his grasp and tumbling into the dust. The soldier barely noticed, standing rigid and unyielding. Watch where you're going, kid, he barked, his voice distorted by the mechanical filters of his helmet. Javali scrambled desperately, his small hands trembling as he gathered the scattered food. Dirt clung to the precious grains and scraps, his heart pounding with panic. No, please, he stammered, his voice cracking. This is all we have. My mom, she hasn't eaten in 2 days. She's sick. She can't eat this now. The soldier tilted his head slightly, the glowing visor casting an ominous light on Javali's hunched form. But no compassion came, only a cold, mechanical response. Not my problem. Without a moment's thought, the soldier sneered and kicked the bowl out of Javali's hands, sending what little remained of the food flying. She deserves nothing. Next time, watch yourself, the soldier spat, turning his back on the boy, indifferent to the boy's suffering. Javali's heart sank as the food hit the ground, the precious ration now ruined, scattered in the dirt. It was all they had. Birds circled overhead, swooping down to peck at the bits that were supposed to keep his mother and him alive for the next few days. He shoved his hands into his ground, hoping there was anything left. His fingers wrapped around 3 tiny bits, battered and worthless. He clenched them tightly, the weight of hopelessness settling over him. Javali stared up at the soldier, a mixture of fear and anger boiling inside him. The gleaming armor, the advanced weaponry, and the mocking sneer, it was all a cruel reminder of the chasm between them. The soldier was a towering monument of power, a symbol of a regime that thrived while the rest of them wasted away in the dirt. The soldier's laughter rang out, sharp and cruel, as he kicked at the scraps of food Javali had managed to salvage. The sound cut through the dusty air like a blade. Javali's fists clenched, his nails digging into his palms as anger overtook his fear. Biting his lip, he stomped the ground hard, sending vibrations through the dirt beneath his feet. A small sphere of earth rose from the ground, his only weapon. Without thinking, he grabbed it and hurled it at the soldier with all the strength his small frame could muster. The earthen projectile struck the back of the soldier's head, silencing his laughter. He staggered forward slightly before turning around, his glowing visor locking onto Javali. The crowd gasped collectively, their gaunt faces frozen in a mix of terror and disbelief. You're using your powers, the soldier growled, his voice metallic and dripping with menace. He raised his weapon, aiming it squarely at Javali. You know the law. Earthbending is only for state-sanctioned labor. Building houses, digging trenches. Not this. The other citizens whispered among themselves, but none dared to intervene. Their hollow eyes darted between the boy and the soldier as though silently mourning him. Javali felt their stares, but refused to look back. He had acted on impulse, and now the full weight of the regime's wrath bore down on him. The soldier took a threatening step closer, his gun still trained on the boy. Javali's breath caught in his throat as memories rushed forward, unbidden and relentless. He saw his younger self standing with his parents in their modest home before the grid arrived. He remembered the days when bending wasn't just allowed, it was celebrated. Earthbenders like him were protectors, builders, and healers. But that was before the invaders came, before the regime stripped them of their freedom and turned their gifts into tools of oppression. He had been just a child then, no older than 8. Javali remembered the day as if it were yesterday. Hovercrafts descended from the sky, sleek and powerful, carrying officials in suits that glittered under the sun. They had spoken with authority, promising a better life, promising jobs, prosperity, schools for their children. His father had believed them. Javali could still picture the hope in his father's eyes. This will change everything, his father had said, his voice filled with optimism. But it hadn't. Instead of the future they promised, the grid took everything. They stripped the fields where food was once grown and replaced them with factories towering, metallic structures that never stopped. The machines roared day and night, spewing smoke that blanketed the sky. And the jobs? They never came for people like them. The grid brought in their own workers, their own machines, leaving Javali's people with nothing but scraps. And the few jobs that were offered barely paid enough to survive. He watched his father's hope wither away as reality set in. The dream they had been sold was a lie. As Javali stood frozen, fists clenched, his memories weighing heavy on his heart, he felt the world around him blur. His father's face calm, kind, and full of sorrow flashed in his mind like a ghost he could never outrun. That day had defined him, a day when kindness was punished and the world became a little darker. The soldier's voice pierced through his thoughts. Last chance, boy. Stand down. The weapon leveled with precision, the barrel gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Javali closed his eyes, a bitter tear slipping down his cheek. This is it, he thought. This is how it ends. The seconds stretched, each one an eternity, as he braced for the shot. But instead of the crack of gunfire, there was a sharp whir, followed by the sound of something slamming into metal. A gust of wind rushed past him, and suddenly, the soldier's voice was cut short. Javali's eyes snapped open to a blur of motion, a figure moving faster than anything he'd ever seen. Green streaks of light lit up the air, slicing through the dust and chaos. The armored soldier was knocked backward, his weapon clattering to the ground. Another soldier aimed and fired, but the streak of green zipped through the air, dodging the laser and retaliating with a swift, bone-cracking kick that sent the soldier sprawling. Javali's heart raced as he stumbled back, watching in stunned disbelief. The figure was relentless, a blur of speed and strength, dispatching each soldier with an effortless combination of agility and precision. When the dust finally settled, the soldiers lay unconscious in the dirt. The figure stood tall, a faint green glow emanating from him like an aura of otherworldly power. He turned to face Javali, his face stern but his eyes kind. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his voice calm but commanding. Javali couldn't speak, his mouth dry with shock. The others in the crowd looked just as stunned, their gaunt faces now lit with a flicker of hope. One brave voice called out, "Who are you?" The green light shimmered faintly as Adamus turned his back to the crowd. He clenched his fists and said, "I'm a superhero. You can call me Vajra, a savior of justice." His words echoed with conviction, resonating with the strength that pierced through the despair hanging over the city. Javali's wide eyes fixed on the figure before him. The term savior of justice felt alien, almost unreal. He muttered to himself, "Superhero? Savior of justice?" The words tumbled awkwardly in his mind, as if they didn't belong in a world like this. He couldn't stop the thoughts from racing. Superheroes only exist in comic books, he told himself. They're just stories, nothing more. But his gaze lingered on Adamus, now shimmering with a surreal intensity. "I've never seen anything like this before." Before Javali could piece together his thoughts, a sharp voice rang out from above. On the rooftop of a mud-walled building, Kyoheim with sharp eyes and fiery determination called down, "Adamus, come on. We've got to hurry. The teleporter's not going to wait." Adamus nodded briskly, his demeanor calm but urgent. He turned to the crowd one last time and said, "Stay safe. Take care of each other." With that, he launched into a sprint, disappearing into the shadows as he followed Kyoheim. Javali stood frozen, his heart pounding. The moment felt like a dream slipping away, too fast to grasp. But before he could reflect, the sound of shouting and crashing shook him from his thoughts. From the skies above, figures in prison uniforms began descending, landing with makeshift gear. Chaos erupted as prisoners scattered in every direction, their faces wild with disbelief and freedom. Javali watched in stunned silence as one man landed nearby, clutching a rusty weapon. The man turned to a woman standing frozen on the street, and his face softened. "We're free," he whispered hoarsely, his voice trembling with emotion. "After all these years, I escaped." The two embraced tightly, tears streaming down their faces. All around, similar scenes played out, prisoners rushing toward loved ones they hadn't seen in years, the weight of their reunion cutting through the chaos. Yet some bore weapons, eyes sharp with the desperation of people who knew freedom was fragile and fleeting. Javali's breath hitched as a thought struck him like lightning. My father. Could he be among them? Without another word, he bolted, his legs carrying him faster than they ever had before. The streets blurred past him as his mind filled with hope and dread in equal measure. When he reached his home, he hesitated for a moment at the door, his chest heaving. Slowly, he pushed it open. Inside, he saw his mother sitting on the floor, her frail body cradled gently in strong, familiar arms. His heart leaped as he recognized the figure. His father was there, holding her as if afraid she might disappear. "Dad?" Javali's voice cracked as he stepped forward, tears spilling down his cheeks. Siviko looked up, his face lined with exhaustion but glowing with relief. "Javali," he said, his voice trembling. He stood, opening his arms wide as his son ran into them. Javali clung tightly to his father, burying his face in his chest. "You're back. You're really back," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. Siviko held his son close, his grip firm but gentle. "I'm here," he murmured, his voice filled with a quiet strength. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in years, Javali felt the warmth of hope bloom in his heart, fragile but alive. In the midst of chaos, his family was whole again. As Javali and his parents embraced, their long-awaited reunion was cut short. Siviko suddenly pulled away, his expression darkening. Without a word, he moved to the corner of the small room and picked up a sleek, futuristic weapon, its edges glowing faintly with an ominous light. Javali's heart sank. Dad, he called out, his voice trembling. Where are you going? You just said you weren't going anywhere. We haven't seen you in years. Siviko turned to face his son, the weight of years in captivity etched deep in his eyes. Son, in prison, we planned for this moment, he said, his voice steady but heavy with resolve. We knew if we ever escaped, we'd have to act fast. This is our only chance to take our city, our country back. These prisoners weren't just criminals. Many were heroes, leaders, revolutionaries locked away to keep us powerless. Today, we fight for a change. No, please, Javali cried, stepping forward. You just got back. Stay with us, stay with me. Siviko knelt and placed his hand on Javali's shoulder, his grip firm yet comforting. I'm sorry, son. I have to do this. If we don't stand now, it'll only get worse. I promise. This time I'll come back. Javali's eyes filled with tears as Siviko rose and headed for the door. He tried to follow, but his mother grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Let him go, Javali, she said softly. Your father is right. If we don't fight back now, we'll lose everything. The grid has taken enough from us. Javali clenched his fists, his body trembling. But we've already lost so much, Mother. What if he doesn't come back? His mother's voice softened, but her resolve did not waver. All we can do now is pray. Even though those savages from the grid killed our god, our prayers must go somewhere. They have to. She knelt down, pulling Javali with her, and together they began to pray. Their voices were quiet, but filled with desperation and hope, a defiant act of faith in a world that had taken everything from them. Meanwhile, across the city, the escaped prisoners, many of them former heroes and warriors stripped of their titles and locked away, rallied together. They moved through the streets, spreading like wildfire, taking their fight to the oppressors who had held them captive for so long. Weapons scavenged from fallen guards gleamed in their hands as they surged toward the heart of the city. The people watched in awe and terror, caught between hope and fear as the battle for their freedom began. Can be skipped. Narrator. Now we return to Adamus and Kaioheim, who had slipped into the shadows of the city's outskirts. Moving swiftly through the maze of mud-built homes and crumbling alleys, their goal was clear: reach the teleporter and regroup. End of narration. Adamus, Kaioheim, and the other inmates rushed through the labyrinth of the city, their breaths ragged as they neared the teleporter. The chaotic scene unfolded behind them, fires burning, gunfire echoing, and the cries of the fallen filling the air. The ground trembled with each passing footstep of the advancing forces, but Adamus pushed forward, his green energy flaring around him like a beacon. That guy Nathan Hunter is fast, Adamus said through clenched teeth, his eyes scanning the crowd ahead. He's already ahead of all of us. We need to hurry. Kaioheim's eyes narrowed, distrust clear in her gaze. I don't trust him, she muttered, quickening her pace. We have to beat him to the teleporter. If he gets there first, we'll be at a disadvantage. The sound of battle intensified as they neared the base. Pig people, robotic soldiers, and other enemies littered the streets, but the group fought relentlessly. Some inmates fell as they battled their way through, determined to reach the teleporter and escape the city. Others made their way toward their families, the anguish of separation still fresh in their hearts. The handful of inmates who survived the brutal journey to the base stood together, battered but determined. Adamus, Kaioheim, and Nathan Hunter led the charge as they reached the entrance. The teleporter, shimmering with faint energy, was visible in the distance, but between them and their goal stood a formidable force, an army of pig people and massive robots, towering like buildings and bristling with weapons. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. The two groups stared at each other, the tension palpable. The inmates' breaths came in sharp gasps, their bodies taut with the anticipation of battle. Adamus stepped forward, his green energy radiating around him in waves. His voice carried an air of calm authority as he addressed the guards. Just let us pass, he said, his tone even but firm. There's no need for us to fight. The guards exchanged uncertain glances before one of the towering robots emitted a mechanical growl. A male soldier stepped forward, his face shadowed beneath his helmet. We're just doing our jobs, he said, his voice tinged with regret. We have orders to keep you from the teleporter. Before Adamus could respond, a loud clanking echoed from the base's interior. The pig general emerged, his armor glinting in the dim light. His expression was one of cold resolve. No matter what, he barked, his voice carrying over the tense silence. Don't let them pass. They cannot reach the teleporter. Fire. Chaos erupted as the guards unleashed a barrage of energy bullets, ray gunfire, and lasers, the onslaught hammering against Adamus's shimmering green barrier. The shield held firm at first, but cracks began to appear as the relentless assault intensified. Adamus's voice rang out over the chaos, steady despite the strain. Brace yourselves, he commanded. The group sprang into action as the shield shattered under the pressure, plunging them into a fierce battle. Kaioheim darted forward, her movement swift and precise. With a single slash, she cut through a guard's weapon, then dispatched him with a fluid motion. Her armor rippled as she extended her arm, calling out, Mutation Realm, Dora Hebe. A black liquid snake slithered from her sleeve, coiling with malevolent grace. The serpentine form darted toward a towering robot the size of a building, wrapping around its limbs before dissolving into a corrosive acid. The massive machine collapsed in a cacophony of screeching metal and explosions, sending debris crashing to the ground as Kaioheim pressed forward, summoning more snakes to dismantle the enemy forces. Nearby, Nathan Hunter charged into the fray, his voice a fierce battle cry. Water sword, he shouted, and liquid formed in the air before solidifying into a blade of ice. With calculated precision, Nathan sliced through the pig guards, his sword leaving trails of frost, blood, and flesh in its wake. He turned his attention to the robots, crafting needles of ice from his water constructs and launching them with deadly accuracy, piercing armor and short-circuiting their systems. Lenses fell from the robots' shattered visors, clattering to the ground amidst the chaos. The battlefield became a chaotic mixture of frost, ice, steam, blood, and debris as his attacks wreaked havoc, each strike methodically ending the lives of his enemies. Adamus hesitated for a breath, watching the chaos spill across the battlefield. Screams, steel, and sparks filled the air. His eyes narrowed, burning with resolve. We can do this without killing anyone, he shouted, though his words nearly drowned beneath the roar of combat. He surged forward, his movements a blur of controlled precision. Blows landed like thunder, yet each strike disarmed rather than destroyed, knocking rifles from hands, shattering servos and robots, and sending armored guards sprawling. The faint glow of his life strings shimmered around him, weaving through the melee like threads of golden lightning. They wrapped around soldiers' limbs, pinning them before hurling them aside, harmless but incapacitated. Then his power deepened. Narrow nerve sync pulsed through him. His life strings lashed outward, embedding themselves into weapons and machines alike. Rifles twitched as if waking from a dream. Cannons jerked upright. Blades rattled and turned. One by one, the weapons turned on their wielders not to kill, but to disarm and suppress. Bursts of fire and steel forced the guards back, scattering their formation. Adamus watched in disbelief as Hunter pressed his ice blade against the chest of a fallen pig guard. The soldier was trembling, weaponless, with fear etched into his face. Just as Hunter prepared to deliver a lethal strike, Adamus sprinted forward, grabbing his wrist mid-motion. Stop. Adamus barked, his voice firm. He's already given up. You're stronger than him. We don't have to kill anyone, let's just get to the teleporter. Hunter sneered, his icy blue eyes narrowing with cold intensity. Don't tell me what to do. With a swift, forceful shove, he pushed Adamus aside and raised his free hand. Ice bow, he roared. A massive sphere of frozen energy crackled to life in his palm before he hurled it at Adamus with unerring precision. Adamus narrowly dodged, the icy blast grazing his shoulder and leaving a chill in its wake. What's up with that, bro? Chill, he shouted, frustration lacing his voice. Hunter's smirk deepened into something more sinister. You don't get it, do you? I don't trust anyone, especially heroes like you. His voice dripped with disdain. I heard what you said when you saved that pig kid that you're a hero. That means you're part of the superhero society. I'm not interested in joining your little team. He stepped closer, his presence radiating menace. You guys do what you want to do. I do what I want to do. I've been burned before, and I won't let it happen again. I'm not here to be part of a team, I'm here to escape. That's it. Before Adamus could respond, Kyoheim strode up, her hand gripping the hilt of her blade. Her expression was cold and resolute. I told you we couldn't trust him, she said sharply. I've fought him before, Adamus. I was hired to take him down. Me and my samurai. He betrayed his own hero society, his own people. That's why he ended up here in the first place. Hunter rolled his eyes, brandishing his ice sword. You think you know me? You don't. I knew you looked familiar, but I don't have time to play silly games. I need to hurry up and get home. You're just another pawn in a game you'll never understand. Without warning, their tension exploded into violence. Hunter swung his ice blade at Kyoheim, who parried the strike with her own blade, sparks flying as their weapons clashed. The air filled with the sound of clanging metal and grunts of exertion as the two combatants circled each other. Enough. Adamus shouted, his frustration boiling over. Gold tendrils of life strings erupted from his hands, coiling around both fighters and pulling them apart. We need to work together. I know we have different ways of handling things, but killing these people isn't the answer. Hunter scowled but lowered his blade. Fine. Just don't get in my way, he muttered, yanking free of the glowing threads. He turned and stalked back into the fray, resuming his icy assault on the guards. Kyoheim sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I hope you know what you're doing, Adamus, she said quietly, before following Hunter into the chaos. The battlefield quieted for a moment as smoke billowed from the main gate. The silence was deafening, and then it was shattered by a massive explosion that tore through the front entrance. The force sent debris flying, and a dense cloud of smoke enveloped the area. From within the haze, 3 towering figures emerged, their shadows ominous against the swirling mist. The shapes grew clearer with each step, revealing an aura of power that sent a chill through the air. Adamus, Kyoheim, and Hunter froze, their eyes locked on the mysterious newcomers. Who are they? Adamus whispered, his body tensing as he prepared for the unknown. The battle was far from over. Narrator, this is what happened before the explosion. Meanwhile, inside the base, the pig general landed silently on the roof, his heavy armor clinking with every step. He stormed through the hallways, headed straight for the training room, where a superhero from the grid was doing push-ups in a quiet corner. The pig general's voice echoed through the room as he barked orders. Stop with the push-ups. We have an emergency. Prisoners have escaped, and we cannot let them get through that teleporter. Get up and fight them. The superhero, a tall man with brown skin, long jet-black dreadlocks, and glowing amber eyes, paused mid-push-up and slowly rose to his full height. His costume, a sleek, shadowy bodysuit of black, red, and white, clung to his frame, exuding an air of both elegance and menace. Clawed boots clinked against the floor as he moved, and his crescent moon-shaped mask glinted he stood under the harsh overhead lights, glaring down at the pig general with an expression of icy disdain. His Trinidadian accent sliced through the tension like a blade. You don't talk to me like that, peasant, he said, a mocking smile twisting his lips. You might be my boss, but I'm still an S-rank citizen. You're lucky the superhero organization put you in charge of me. With a sudden surge of excitement, his eyes gleamed. I'm tired of going to these pointless government meetings in this stupid country, making sure y'all do what we say. Finally, I can do my real job and fight. The general flinched, his expression flooding with panic. I'm sorry, Moonshadow. You're so much better than me, it's just, if we fail here, both our careers are over. Moonshadow's face darkened, but his voice remained calm. Correct. And watch the way you speak to a superhero. He walked toward the door, his presence commanding the room. Don't worry, I'll handle this. No one will get past me. The general nodded rapidly, grateful for Moonshadow's promise. Yes, thank you, Moonshadow. We can't afford to lose this base. As Moonshadow stepped toward the exit, a portal opened beside him with a sudden, sharp flash. A rift sliced through reality, and within the portal, multiple blades seemed to form, cutting through the very fabric of space. From this strange tear in the world, 2 samurai emerged, their presence imposing. The first samurai was a familiar face Habihiko Nagar. He wore a sleek black belt and gleaming armor pieces that reflected the dim light. His figure was elegant yet intimidating, and with 3 swords strapped to his back, the katana, wakizashi, and tanto, he exuded the discipline of a true warrior. The second samurai, Tawareya Satatsu, stood at an imposing 6 feet 5 inches, his strong build amplifying his sharp Asian features. Dark black hair framed his face, one brown eye gleaming with intensity, while the other remained hidden beneath a sleek black eye patch. His outfit was a formidable samurai's garb, woven with thick ropes layered into the design, giving him both a rugged and commanding presence. The black and purple tones of his armor carried an austere elegance, each knot and cord accentuating his stature. Upon his head rested a broad triangular Jingasa-style samurai hat, its shadow casting an air of mystery across his features. Every detail of his attire marked him as a warrior of immense presence, one who carried both tradition and intimidation wherever he walked. The pig general looked visibly alarmed, his gaze flickering between the samurai. You people can just appear out of nowhere? Doesn't matter, more help is better. Did the Grinch send you for backup? They know about the prison escape. Heavy Hiko responded with a calm yet resolute tone. No, I came here on orders for my country. The samurai have been tasked with capturing an inmate Kyoheim. But if a prison escape is happening, then it seems our objectives align. Moonshadow, ever the strategist, pointed toward the massive doors ahead. Past those doors lies the one you seek. But we cannot help you achieve your goals without first dealing with the threat beyond. The second samurai, his keen senses alert, nodded in agreement. I can sense her energy. She is near. The pig general, anxious but determined, urged, let's get it done. He sprinted toward the doors, followed closely by the samurai. As they prepared for the confrontation, Moonshadow summoned a coffin from thin air, its presence dark and foreboding. Placing his palms together, he whispered an incantation. The coffin creaked open, releasing a burst of wind that slammed into the massive doors with explosive force. The sound echoed through the hallway, shaking the walls and reverberating all the way to the battlefield outside. The door was obliterated and chaos erupted. As the smoke cleared, everyone froze, staring at each other with intensity. Even the pig guards, thrown back by the blast, ceased firing. In the eerie silence, Kyoheim gripped her sword tightly and screamed, Master Nagar. From the shadows emerged Nagar and Tawareya Satatsu, their presence as sharp and menacing as their blades. Nagare's smirk carried an air of condescension as he addressed the group. I'm not surprised she escaped from prison, he sneered, his voice cold and sharp. She's always been a snake difficult to control, unlike the others from the sister clan, the Anabi Geisha. She's one of my proudest students, no doubt about it. But when it came to following the rules, he paused, letting his words hang like a blade over her head. She always failed. Tawareya stepped closer, his tone dripping with disdain. It's a shame, he muttered, his eyes narrowing on Kyoheim. A woman like that should have learned to be submissive. His words hung in the air like poison, his contempt unmistakable. Adamus blinked in shock, his tone a mix of disbelief and frustration. That's your master? This jerk. Kyoheim glared at him. You know him? She shot back, then added with pride, and yes, he's my master. I've learned a lot from him. Adamus crossed his arms, his irritation evident. Oh, I know him. He's tried to kill me. Multiple times. That sounds exactly like something he'd do, Kyoheim said, unfazed. Nathan, already exasperated, muttered under his breath as he readied his weapon. Why am I always stuck with the worst kinds of people? Samurai and superheroes. Just my luck. While the group exchanged heated words, Moonshadow stood off to the side, his body trembling with barely contained energy. His wild eyes fixated on Adamus, unblinking and alight with manic fervor. Inside his head, a storm of thoughts swirled, feeding his growing madness. That's him. That's Vajra, the kid who took on Omnimorph. I watched every second of that fight, dissected every move. His punches, his kicks, he's the perfect opponent. Finally, someone worth my time. If I can break him, then I'll know. I'll know for certain I'm strong enough. Strong enough to hurt Omnimorph. Strong enough to prove all this training wasn't in vain. His breath quickened as the voices in his head grew louder. This is it. The only reason I ever joined this pathetic superhero society was to find someone like him. Not to protect anyone. Not to save anyone. Just to fight. To win. To be the strongest. And now he's right here. Right in front of me. A crazed grin spread across his face, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth as he clenched his fists tight enough to make his knuckles crack. Finally, he muttered under his breath, his voice barely a whisper but rising in a crescendo. Finally, a real challenge. His shout cut through the tension like a blade, silencing everyone. All eyes turned to him as he stepped forward, his movements twitchy and erratic, like a coiled spring about to snap. Enough talking. Moonshadow roared, his voice raw and guttural, reverberating through the room like a primal war cry. His trembling finger jabbed toward Adamus, his grin stretched unnaturally wide, his teeth bared like a feral beast. You and me, Vajra. One-on-one. No interruptions. No holding back. I've been waiting for this. Let's see if you're as good as they say, or if you'll crumble like the rest. But as his declaration hung in the air, the others barely spared him a glance, as though he were little more than an irritating fly buzzing in the corner. Their attention shifted seamlessly, leaving him seething in silence. Nagar scoffed, his tone dripping with disdain as he turned to Tawareya. These so-called heroes are always a nuisance. Let's just deal with these people ourselves. We don't need this lunatic complicating things. Tawareya smirked, stepping forward with measured arrogance. That sounds like a perfect plan. His blade gleamed in the dim light as he gestured dismissively toward Adamus. You handle him. I'll take care of the real reason we're here. With deliberate menace, he pointed his sword at Kyoheim, his gaze narrowing like a predator sizing up its prey. Kyoheim's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on her sword. Why me? She snapped. Nagare's voice was calm, yet every word carried the weight of a death sentence. We've been ordered to kill you, Kyoheim, he began, his gaze unwavering and ice-cold. For the murder of Princess Akemi Yamamoto. He let the statement hang in the air before continuing, his tone as sharp as a blade. And for stealing her eye ability, Toki no Mi. We examined her body. Her special power, the very essence of her eyes, was taken. Kyoheim's eyes widened with fury and desperation as she stepped forward, her voice rising in defiance. No, I didn't kill her, she shouted, her fists clenched. It was her brother, I swear it. Her last words to me, she gave me her eye ability, Toki no Mi, before she died. You have to believe me. Tawarea let out a derisive laugh, his sneer dripping with disdain. You're just a woman. Be silent, he snapped, his words laced with venom. The sisterhood truly taught you nothing, Anabugeisha. You've been nothing but a disgrace. He drew his sword slowly, the steel gleaming with malice. Killing you will raise my rank, he continued, his voice now sharp and eager. A traitor like you deserves to die by my blade. Before Kyoheim could respond, Adamus surged forward, placing himself between her and the two samurai. No one's killing anyone, he barked, his voice echoing through the fractured air. Nagare's gaze darkened as he stepped closer, his hand resting on his katana's hilt. You, he hissed, his words venomous. You're the one who killed my brother. I'll deal with you first. He shot a glance at Tawarea. Kill her. She's yours. Before Tawarea could move, Moonshadow's voice erupted, drowning out the tension. No, he bellowed, foam frothing at his mouth as his eyes blazed with madness. I said he's mine. I will fight him alone. His voice shook the walls. I need a fair fight to prove my strength. If this boy could stand against Omnimorph and survive, then beating him will prove my worth to everyone. Without warning, Moonshadow slammed his palms together, his voice ringing out in a commanding chant, Koroni Zephyr. The coffin he had summoned earlier shot into the sky, its ascent cutting through the air with a deafening roar. Now it hovered ominously above them, a harbinger of chaos. The ancient wood groaned, splitting open with a thunderous crack. From within, a tempest of raw, unbridled energy erupted, wind not of this world, but from a higher dimensional plane. The air itself shattered reality as it surged through, tearing the fabric of existence with every gust. Its force spiraled outward in a cataclysmic wave. The sheer magnitude of the blast tore into the earth, carving deep fissures and sending massive currents of energy in every direction. The group was caught in the whirlwind, their resistance futile as the shockwave hurled them through the air like leaves in a storm. The ground beneath them fractured and heaved, splitting them into three groups. Kyoheim, Tawarea, and Nagar were flung in one direction, their cries lost in the maelstrom. Adamus was sent hurtling skyward in another, while Hunter spiraled away in yet another direction, vanishing into the chaos. As Adamus soared through the air, the world spun around him in a dizzying blur. Thoughts raced through his mind. What kind of move could unleash such devastating power? Twisting midair, he caught sight of the ground rapidly approaching. Below him lay a small, ramshackle mud brick village, a place teeming with chaos. Pig-like humanoids, Obaporkins scrambled in panic, their shrill cries filling the air. Some fled in desperation, while others, clad in crude uniforms, barked orders and apprehended their kin. The scene was one of utter pandemonium, with Piggards, the village's guards, desperately enforcing evacuations. Adamus reacted swiftly. Before impact, he unleashed a series of rapid, calculated punches into the air. Each strike generated powerful bursts of wind, countering his descent and slowing him just enough to land gracefully. His boots hit the ground with a controlled thud, dust swirling around him in the aftermath. Standing amidst the chaos, Adamus's mind reeled. Kyoheim, he thought, urgency tightening in his chest. He could still picture her, facing those two deadly samurai. They're too powerful for her to handle alone. If I don't reach her in time. The grim thought trailed off as his eyes darted to the horizon. Yet, hesitation gripped him. His thoughts spiraled as conflicting emotions tugged at his heart. My mom, my country, the grid. He turned to glance at the distant base where the teleporter waited, shimmering faintly in the chaos. This was his chance, his opportunity to escape, to return home, to honor the responsibilities he had sworn to uphold. But then his eyes swept over the scene around him. The village was in turmoil. Innocent lives were at stake. Frightened villagers darted past him, their cries of desperation cutting through the noise. Children clung to their parents, while others cowered in doorways. Adamus could see the terror etched into their faces, the helplessness in their eyes. He clenched his fists, torn between duty and morality. Memories flooded his mind like an unrelenting tide. Dylan's voice surfaced first, a sharp reminder from the past, spoken after Adamus had taken a brutal beating trying to save their friend Stephanie. Stop risking your life for other people, Adamus. You can't save everyone. Another voice followed, softer but no less impactful. His mother's words, spoken in worry and love, echoed in his ears. Stop risking your life for strangers, Adamus. You can't save everyone. The weight of their words bore down on him, but Adamus refused to yield. He clenched his fists tighter, his knuckles white as he looked to the horizon where Kyoheim was. She needed him. Those samurai, he could see their deadly precision, their cold intent in his mind's I would kill her if he didn't act. His jaw tightened as he muttered under his breath, I can do both. I can do it all. His heart surged with determination. I believe in myself. He took a deep breath and shouted into the chaos, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Kyoheim, survive. I'm coming. He turned to sprint toward the direction of her group, adrenaline coursing through his veins, but before he could take more than a few strides, a shadow descended upon him. The air grew cold, and the ground seemed to tremble under the presence of something formidable. Landing before him with an ominous thud was Moonshadow, his dark figure radiating an aura of malice and power. The figure straightened, his piercing eyes locking onto Adamus, a twisted smile curling his lips. Finally, Moonshadow hissed, his voice dripping with excitement. Just you and me. No distractions. Let's settle this. Adamus's muscles tensed as he locked eyes with Moonshadow, his heart pounding with anticipation. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, a palpable tension signaling the clash to come. He took a deliberate step forward, his fists clenching tightly at his sides. Adamus, why do you want to fight me so badly? Moonshadow smirked, his demeanor smug and unshaken. Because, Vajra, the superhero game is all about popularity. And right now, you're the talk of the grid, the entire city. The entire country is buzzing about your fight with Omnimorph. Beating you will boost my rank. You're the key to my rise. Adamus rolled his shoulders, exhaustion creeping into his tone. We can fight later. I'm sore, and I've got a friend to help. But Moonshadow's grin widened. Enough talking. In an instant, Moonshadow lunged forward, unleashing a flurry of punches. Each strike carried devastating force, driving Adamus backward with every impact. The two tore through mud buildings and homes, the destruction trailing behind them. Villagers screamed and scattered as chaos erupted around them. Moonshadow's relentless assault escalated. Blow after blow landed, culminating in a powerful strike that left Adamus staggering. Seizing the moment, Moonshadow opened his mouth wide, releasing a massive air blast. Adamus barely managed to block it with his arms, though the sheer force sent him skidding back several feet. Gritting his teeth, Adamus raised his hand, forming the Gan Mudra with his fingers. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, centering himself. When he opened them, they glowed with a brilliant yellow light. Tenshi no Mi, he whispered, his voice carrying a calm yet commanding tone. Emerald energy flared around him, coalescing into glowing green. With a swift motion, he unleashed them. The first string missed as Moonshadow deftly dodged, but the second wrapped around his torso with precision, tightening like an unbreakable tether. Adamus pulled Moonshadow toward him with a sharp tug, unleashing a flurry of devastating punches. Each strike landed with unrelenting force, sending shockwaves through the air. Moonshadow struggled, trapped by the life string, unable to evade the barrage. In desperation, Moonshadow clasped his palms together and shouted, Koroni Zephyr. A dark, ominous coffin materialized beside Adamus, its ancient wood groaning as the lid creaked open. From within, a massive air blast erupted, not merely wind, but a force that tore through reality itself. The air howled with impossible pressure, carrying with it the distortion of a higher dimensional place. Fractures shimmered in the battlefield, as though existence itself were splintering under the foreign current. Adamus barely dodged the attack, his life strings flashing as he released and recoiled away, just in time to evade the devastating surge. The blast carved through the field, shredding stone and steel as if they were parchment. When the gale finally subsided, the two combatants stood apart, the ground between them scarred and warped, a jagged no-man's land of twisted destruction, an open reminder that the coffin's breath came from beyond the known dimensions. Moonshadow straightened, his confidence unshaken as he placed a hand on the coffin. In a flash, he teleported to its side. His voice was laced with arrogance as he spoke. This is why I'm unbeatable. Do you see this coffin? This isn't just some relic. This coffin is the nexus of all winds. Whenever wind stirs across any world or any universe, it originates here. This is the birthplace of gales, hurricanes, and zephyrs. Without it, there is no wind. He let out a chilling laugh, his words ringing with conviction. This coffin is one of the 20 legendary artifacts of this planet, and I possess it. You stand no chance against me, Vajra. Adamus's gaze swept over the carnage around him. Broken bodies of pigfolk and Abaporkan soldiers littered the ground, lifeless victims of the devastating blast he had narrowly evaded. His fists tightened, veins bulging as a surge of fury coursed through him. You're reckless, Adamus growled, his voice low but heavy with determination. I don't care where the winds meet or how powerful your coffin is. You've caused enough destruction. You're going down. Fixing his eyes on the coffin, Adamus's glowing Tenshi no Mi eyes locked onto the ominous coffin, his piercing gaze cutting through its dark aura. The coffin hovered menacingly in the air, its polished obsidian surface gleaming with a sinister sheen, marked by deep, crimson etchings that resembled jagged scars of ancient origin. At its center, a grotesque skeletal head was embedded, its hollow, crystalline eyes glowing a baleful red. The crystals within the sockets pulsed with eerie light, alive, casting faint, blood-red reflections onto the coffin's surface. Above the coffin floated 3 candles, their flames flickering unnaturally in defiance of the still air. 2 emitted ghostly, cold light, their wax frozen in time. The third, larger candle burned with a deep crimson flame, casting jagged, chaotic shadows that writhed across the battlefield like living specters. The sides of the coffin were inscribed with an intricate weave of symbols and scripts, spanning countless eras and cultures: ancient Greek, Norse runes, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Sanskrit, and others long forgotten. Each word glimmered faintly, pulsating as if alive, their meanings laced with a dark, otherworldly energy. The inscriptions seemed to clash and writhe, as though competing for dominance, their power radiating an unrelenting malevolence. At the base of the coffin, a chilling engraving shimmered softly in the dim, hellish light. The words were etched with ancient precision, simple yet foreboding, where the winds meet. The phrase exuded a sinister energy, as if merely reading it could summon the horrors bound within. Around the engraving, jagged cracks spread like veins, glowing faintly with a sickly green light, as if the very coffin strained to contain the power it held. Adamus could feel the wind itself twisting unnaturally around the coffin, converging toward it, paying homage to its master. The closer he looked, the more the coffin seemed to pulse, almost breathing, as though it were alive, an unholy nexus of chaos and power that defied the laws of nature. It wasn't just a coffin. It was a prison, a throne, and a weapon all in one, radiating malice so potent that it seemed to poison the very air around it. Moonshadow hovered menacingly above Adamus, his voice echoing like thunder as he shouted, "Are you ready for round 2? The coffin, as if responding to its master, began to groan and creak before its lid slowly closed, sealing its ominous power for the moment. Without hesitation, Moonshadow hurtled through the air, his speed tearing through the wind as he charged toward Adamus. The clash was instant and ferocious. Fists and kicks blurred into a whirlwind of blows, each strike cracking the air like a whip. Adamus's strikes found their mark, forcing Moonshadow to stagger. Seizing the opening, Adamus clinched him in a powerful Muay Thai hold, driving his knees mercilessly into Moonshadow's midsection. Each knee landed with a resounding impact, forcing grunts of pain from his adversary. With a burst of strength, Adamus executed a flawless judo throw, hurling Moonshadow through the air like a ragdoll. Moonshadow's body skidded across the ground, bouncing and tumbling with bone-jarring force before finally coming to rest. The earth cracked beneath him, but he managed to rise, his grin defiant. Adamus sprinted toward him, pinning Moonshadow to the ground with an iron grip. "Just give up." Adamus growled, his voice firm, his eyes blazing with determination. But Moonshadow's grin widened, his confidence unshaken. "Why would I give up?" he sneered. His eyes gleamed with malevolence as he whispered, "I've got you right where I want you." Before Adamus could react, Moonshadow screamed, "Koroni Zephyr." The coffin reappeared in an instant, its presence heralded by a deafening roar as it cracked open once more. A colossal blast of wind erupted forth, a tempest so fierce it shattered the ground beneath it. The force hit Adamus like a hurricane, launching him through the air with devastating power. He crashed through the mud brick homes of the panicked pig villagers, each impact leaving a trail of destruction. Walls crumbled, and debris flew in all directions as Adamus tumbled uncontrollably, finally skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust and rubble. Groaning, Adamus rose to his feet, his body battered and bloodied. His arms and legs throbbed with pain, and crimson streaks lined his limbs where the razor-sharp winds had cut into his flesh. He clenched his fists, his breath ragged, but his resolve unbroken. That coffin. Adamus muttered to himself, his glowing Tenshi no Mi eyes narrowing. It's no joke. He stood tall, the green energy and his life strings beginning to swirl around him, his determination unwavering. The battle was far from over. Moonshadow emerged from the rubble with feral intensity, his claws tearing through the earth like the talons of a predator honing in on its prey. He rushed at Adamus, his movements fluid and primal, every step a calculated stride of power. As he closed the distance, he swung with the force and precision of a seasoned warrior, his reflexes sharp as a lion's pounce. Adamus, reacting in an instant, ducked under the strike with effortless agility. In the same motion, he launched himself upward, delivering a flying knee that struck Moonshadow with explosive force, sending him hurtling skyward. Adamus landed gracefully, his movements as fluid as water, his green energy swirling around him like a protective aura. Wasting no time, Adamus summoned a ball of glowing green energy interwoven with streaks of vibrant gold, the sphere pulsing with immense power. With a surge of intent, he unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, each one streaking toward Moonshadow like guided missiles. The sky erupted in a cascade of explosions, the sound deafening as the blasts tore through the air. From the shroud of dust and debris, Moonshadow's form emerged unscathed. His claws moved with blinding speed, swatting the energy blasts aside as if they were mere annoyances. Running through the air as if defying gravity itself, he closed in on Adamus once again. Their clash resumed with renewed ferocity, their fists colliding in a rapid exchange of blows that echoed like thunderclaps. Adamus began to find his rhythm, landing a series of devastating leg kicks that forced Moonshadow to stagger, the impact sending him skidding backward in a series of uncontrolled backflips. Moonshadow steadied himself, his lips curling into a grin as he wiped blood from the corner of his mouth. You're a good fighter, he admitted, his tone carrying a mix of respect and menace. You're very worthy. But now let's see how you handle the true power of my coffin where the winds meet. Stage 2. Adamus's eyes narrowed, his glowing Tenshi no Mi illuminating the battlefield. What do you mean, Stage 2? He demanded. Moonshadow chuckled darkly, his confidence palpable. All the moves you've seen from the coffin so far, they were just Stage 1. You've yet to witness its true power. As he spoke, the coffin began to creak open once more. This time, its blackened surface pulsed with a sinister red glow, the skeletal carvings appearing almost alive, writhing imbued with malevolence. The single-lit candle atop it burned brighter, its flame dancing wildly as though feeding off the rising energy. The coffin glowed an ominous red, its eerie light intensifying as the candles atop it blazed with feral, chaotic flames. The air crackled with energy, and the wind howling from the coffin lashed out violently, tearing through the battlefield like an unrelenting storm. Adamus, his energy radiating like a shield, steadied himself amidst the chaos. Through the heightened clarity of his Tenshi no Mi, time seemed to slow. He could trace the furious winds, track the swirling debris, and feel the crushing force of the impending destruction. With fluid precision, he dodged the blast, but a sharp dread gripped him as he turned. Behind him, the defenseless Obaporkans, trembling in fear, stood directly in the path of the oncoming devastation. Without hesitation, Adamus turned back, his determination unwavering. Shield, he roared, summoning a glowing green energy barrier that shimmered like emerald glass. He braced himself as the winds crashed against the shield, the force like a tidal wave threatening to shatter it. Cracks began to spiderweb across its surface, and Adamus gritted his teeth, pushing his energy to its limits. Run, he shouted over his shoulder to the Obaporkans, pig people. Hurry, I can't hold this much longer. The villagers scrambled to safety, but just as Adamus's strength faltered, a sudden barrage of yellow energy beams rained down from the sky, bombarding Moonshadow. The relentless assault forced the coffin to close with a loud, echoing thud. Startled, Adamus turned to see the source of the attack. To his astonishment, a group of Obaporkans' pig people had armed themselves with scavenged weapons ripped from the fallen military guards. The air filled with the crack of blasters and the clash of steel, as even some of the guards themselves, now swayed by Adamus's defiance, fought side by side with the prisoners he had freed earlier. The makeshift army fired relentlessly, their courage sparking hope in the chaos and turning the tide of despair into defiance. But the Obaporkans' resolve didn't end with scavenged arms. Several of them had tapped into their latent powers, earthbending with raw, desperate fury. Shards of stone erupted from the ground at their command, hurled like jagged spears. Others stomped the earth, sending tremors across the battlefield, knocking soldiers from their footing. From the dust and rubble rose monstrous forms, hulking beasts of earth and stone, crude yet terrifying, animated by sheer willpower and rage. They roared as they marched forward, their heavy limbs pulverizing the ground beneath them. And every blast, every spear of stone, every earthborn monster, they all surged toward a single target, Moonshadow. At the forefront of this rebellion stood Sutra, Adamus's prison friend, his grip tight on a modified blaster sparking with unstable energy. His voice rose above the thunder of stone and gunfire, booming across the battlefield like a war drum. Keep firing. Don't let up for a second. Bring him down. The battlefield became a storm of resistance guns, stone, and spirit united against one foe. Sutra strode confidently toward Adamus, his presence radiating an unshakable resolve. Vajra, he called out, using the name Adamus had only recently begun to hear whispered with reverence. Are you okay? I knew there was something special about you. Always helping people. Always standing up for us. Adamus nodded, exhaustion and gratitude in his voice. Thanks for the assist, Sutra. But this guy, he's my fight. Sutra frowned, determination flaring in his eyes. You can't do this alone. Not against him. Adamus shook his head, glancing at the crowd. If he hits anyone here, they'll die instantly. Especially with that coffin. I can't risk it. Just tell me where I can take him somewhere far from everyone so we can finish this one-on-one. Siviko hesitated, then nodded. All right, Vajra. I've got you. But we're following close behind, just in case. You're not alone in this. Moonshadow shielded his face with his claws as relentless yellow lasers scorched his fur, his guttural growl shaking the battlefield. The Obaporkins, desperate and determined, stomped their feet into the earth, hurling massive chunks of stone at their tormentor. Stop it. This is annoying. Bees, he roared, his claws flashing menacingly in the dim, chaotic light. With a furious leap, Moonshadow soared into the air, his movements swift and feral. Descending upon the Obaporkins with unbridled rage, his claws tore through their ranks, slashing through their earthy defenses. Cries of agony pierced the air as limbs were severed and the ground became stained with their suffering, Moonshadow's rampage leaving devastation in its wake. But before he could claim more lives, Adamus intervened. Yellow tendrils of energy as life strings shot out from his body, wrapping around Moonshadow like unbreakable chains. The strings tightened, locking Moonshadow in place midair. He struggled, but the bindings held firm. Moonshadow grinned, an unsettling calm overtaking his rage. Not a problem, he sneered, his voice low and menacing. The coffin behind him began to glow again, the wind stirring ominously as it prepared to summon its next devastating assault. Adamus stepped forward, cutting him off. Before you say those magical words, he began, his voice steady but commanding. How about you follow me all the way down there? He pointed toward the forest on the edge of the town, its dark canopy swaying in the distance. It'll be a fair fight. That's what you want, right? To prove you're better than me? Moonshadow's grin faltered, replaced by a curious tilt of his head. Then let's settle it there, Adamus continued. Without hesitation, he released the life strings, the golden energy dissolving into the air. No distractions. Just you and me. Moonshadow's smile returned, now laced with malice. You've got guts, he said, his voice carrying an almost playful tone. Fine. Lead the way. Adamus took off, sprinting toward the forest with purpose, his green energy aura illuminating the path ahead. Moonshadow followed close behind, flying low like a predator stalking its prey. Among the Obaporkins, pig people, only a select few stepped forward, their faces grim with resolve. Siviko stood at the forefront, his voice steady as he addressed the group. Just 5 of us. The best fighters. The rest stay here and protect the town. The chosen group nodded, their weapons at the ready as they began their pursuit. Siviko led the way, his eyes fixed on Adamus and Moonshadow disappearing into the woods. Despite the danger ahead, determination burned in his heart. He wouldn't let Adamus face this battle alone, not without backup. Moonshadow and Adamus stood facing each other in the eerie stillness of the forest. The trees swayed gently, the air charged with tension. Moonshadow's lips curled into a snarl. I'm done playing games with you, he growled. It's time you see my ultimate form, what I truly am. Adamus narrowed his eyes, but stood his ground. Moonshadow's transformation began in an instant, his human-like features contorting into something primal. His head elongated, his face shifting into a beastly snout. Hair sprouted rapidly, covering his once sleek form, while his claws grew even sharper, glinting like blades. His superhero costume shredded as thick, bristling fur replaced it. His teeth extended into razor-sharp fangs, and his glowing red eyes burned with unrestrained ferocity. Moonshadow had fully become the Lagahu, a monstrous fusion of man and beast. Before either could acknowledge the transformation, Moonshadow lunged with raw, unbridled aggression. His fists and feet struck out in rapid succession, a whirlwind of punches and kicks aimed at Adamus. At the same time, his ominous coffin materialized behind him, glowing faintly before releasing a powerful air blast. Adamus dodged the initial flurry, countering with a powerful punch that connected with Moonshadow's jaw, sending him hurtling into the trees. But before Adamus could press his advantage, the coffin's air blast struck him, cutting a deep gash into his arm. He stumbled back, clutching his bleeding arm. Gritting his teeth, Adamus glanced at the wound but didn't falter. He leaped away, narrowly evading another barrage of air blasts that tore through the trees like knives slicing paper. But Moonshadow reappeared behind him in a FDL+, gripping Adamus tightly in a bone-crushing hold. Are you insane? Adamus spat through gritted teeth, his voice rising in desperation as he struggled to maintain his footing against the rising winds. You're going to take the next blast head-on. You're trying to kill us both. Moonshadow's grin widened, a wicked glint in his glowing red eyes. No, he said, his tone calm and assured, yet laced with an almost maniacal certainty. This isn't suicide, Adamus. This is evolution. Stage 3 Coroni Zephyr, infinite black hole. The coffin began to change, its glow shifting from a malevolent crimson to a deep, abyssal black that seemed to swallow the light around it. For a moment, the forest fell eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Then, in an instant, the air erupted into chaos. The coffin became the center of an unstoppable force, its pull growing exponentially. Leaves, dirt, and loose branches flew toward it, disappearing into its gaping maw. The winds howled with ferocity, twisting into a cyclone that tore through the forest. Massive chunks of earth cracked and lifted into the air, spiraling toward the coffin before being consumed. Entire trees, roots and all, were wrenched from the ground, their trunks splintering as they vanished into the infinite higher dimensional plane of wind. Adamus staggered, planting his feet firmly as his green energy flared around him like a protective aura. This is madness, he yelled, struggling to stay upright against the higher dimensional gravitational pull, a deep, abyssal black that seemed to swallow the light around it. For a moment, the forest fell eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Then, in an instant, the air erupted into chaos. Moonshadow stood in the maelstrom, seemingly unaffected, his monstrous form illuminated by the swirling chaos around him. He threw his arms wide, basking in the destruction. Do you see it now, Vajra? He roared, his voice cutting through the storm. This is my power. This is the Coroni Zephyr in its final form of force of nature, unstoppable and infinite. Adamus's eyes widened as the pull of the coffin grew unbearable, its relentless suction dragging him forward despite his efforts to resist. His boots scraped against the splintered earth as he fought to anchor himself, his green energy flaring wildly to counter the oppressive force. What is this coffin? Adamus muttered through gritted teeth, his body trembling as the winds tore at him. The abyssal pull intensified, overpowering even his formidable strength. Before he could react, his feet left the ground, and he was hurtling toward the coffin's dark maw. The winds tore at his body, shredding the surrounding foliage and debris as the swirling chaos consumed everything in its path. Adamus gritted his teeth, throwing out his arms to grasp at anything to slow his descent. But there was nothing to hold on to nothing but the endless dimensional winds in the coffin awaiting him. His green energy flickered and wavered under the immense gravitational force, but he refused to give in. As he neared the coffin, Adamus thrust out his hands, channeling every ounce of his energy into a desperate maneuver. His fingers found purchase on the coffin's edges, glowing with ominous red-black energy. The violent suction threatened to tear him apart, but he clung tightly, his muscles straining as the winds lashed against him. The cyclone roared louder, a deafening symphony of destruction, as Adamus fought to resist the pull. His green energy flared brighter, but he could feel his strength waning. "Is this your plan, Moonshadow?" Adamus shouted over the cacophony, his voice raw with defiance. "To drag us both into oblivion?" Moonshadow stood resolute as the coffin's gravitational pull grew stronger, the howling winds devouring everything in their path. Adamus staggered, his energy flickering as he struggled to resist the overwhelming force. Moonshadow threw his head back, a maniacal laugh echoing across the battlefield. "You've been noticed, Vajra," he taunted, his tone dripping with contempt. "This coffin's third form is my ultimate weapon. It won't touch its master, it exists only to consume everything else. Its winds won't merely suck you in, they're strong enough to devour entire solar systems, galaxies, even universes. You're nothing against its power." His crimson eyes burned with malevolent triumph as he stepped closer, his presence radiating dominance. "This coffin is infinite. Its winds will shred you to nothingness, just like all the others I've buried within. You're next, Vajra. You'll be one more name in this." The coffin's winds roared louder as the lid began to slowly close, drawing Adamus closer to his doom. His fingers clung desperately to the coffin's edge, his strength nearly spent. But then, over the deafening howl of the winds, Adamus heard a sound. Fire. Fire. Civico and his small crew of 5 warriors had arrived. 2 of them unleashed blasts from laser guns, while the others hurled chunks of earth directly at Moonshadow. One of the projectiles struck him hard on the back of the head. Moonshadow snarled, enraged by the sudden assault. He dodged the oncoming attacks with feral agility, screaming, "You annoying little brats. I should have put you pigs in your place. You answer to me, you answer to the grid." His distraction was all Adamus needed. Clinging to the coffin with one hand, he summoned his yellow life string with the other, sending it streaking toward Moonshadow. The energy coiled around Moonshadow's waist, and Adamus shouted, "Switch." In an instant, their positions reversed. Adamus tumbled away from the coffin, landing in front of Civico and the others, while Moonshadow was dragged into the maelstrom of the coffin's infinite winds. "No!" Moonshadow bellowed, his voice a storm that tore through the air. His claws lashed out, swiping at the very winds that clawed at him, but the coffin's power was relentless, pulling him closer to its dark mouth. His body surged with frantic energy, flashes of red and black lighting up the sky as he fought against the inevitable. But the winds were unforgiving, stripping away his strength with every breath, every heartbeat. Adamus, dazed and struggling to catch his breath, found his footing. His eyes locked on Moonshadow, now caught in the death grip of the coffin's winds. The sounds of Civico's crew, once roaring with anticipation, faded into nothing. There was no victory here, only a moment suspended between life and death. Adamus glanced up to the coffin, dread creeping into his chest. He knew what was coming. Without thinking, Adamus leapt into the air, hurtling toward the edge of the swirling vortex, coffin's winds. But as he neared, Moonshadow's body was already being dragged deeper into the higher dimensional wind realm, consumed by its insatiable force. "No!" Adamus shouted, his hands reaching desperately. As Moonshadow began to fall, Adamus shot out his life strings, golden threads of energy that lashed onto Moonshadow's form. "I've got you." Adamus roared, planting his feet and pulling with everything he had. His voice was raw with desperation. "Hold on." The golden strings pulsed with energy as Adamus fought with every ounce of strength to pull him free. But the coffin's winds were deafening, drowning his cries. The storm ripped louder, hungrier, its blades carving deeper. Moonshadow's body convulsed, blood sprang in violent bursts as the winds shredded him piece by piece. His monstrous roar turned into a scream half rage, half terror as he was dragged further into the howling abyss. And Adamus, his golden threads splintering in his hands, could do nothing but watch as his enemy. Moonshadow's screams echoed, a mix of fury and despair, as the coffin's lid began to close. Adamus dove out of the way just as the coffin sealed itself with a thunderous clap. He collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily, as silence fell over the battlefield. Civico and his warriors stood frozen, staring at the coffin now lying inert on the forest floor. Civico broke the silence, shaking his head in awe. "What a way to go out," he muttered. Adamus rose slowly, his eyes fixed on the coffin. "It's not over," he said quietly. "Not yet." Adamus turned to Civico and his crew, urgency written all over his face. "Thanks for the help, everyone," he said quickly. "But I've got to go." His thoughts flashed to Kyoheim, and his chest tightened. "I hope I'm not too late." Civico grinned knowingly. "Go on, kid. We'll catch up. I can see how important your girlfriend is to you." Adamus froze, his energy faltering for a moment. "Girlfriend?" he stammered, his face flushing with embarrassment. No. I just met her. I don't even know her like that." Civico laughed heartily, shaking his head. Sure. I remember when I was your age. I didn't understand my feelings either. You're not risking your life for someone you just met, kid." Adamus scratched the back of his head, his awkwardness palpable. "I already have a girlfriend," he muttered. "I was supposed to take her to prom. But Kyoheim feels different. Like I've known her before. Maybe in another life." He shook his head, as if trying to clear his thoughts. "That doesn't matter right now. I've got to go." With that, his green energy erupted around him, propelling him forward as he sprinted off into the distance. His thoughts raced alongside him. "Please, when I get there, still be alive, Kyoheim." Civico watched him disappear, a smirk still on his face. He turned to his crew. "Let's follow him, just in case. And bring the coffin." One of the crew members nodded, using their earth powers to lift a massive chunk of ground. The group climbed aboard, the slab of earth hovering effortlessly as it carried them after Adamus. Meanwhile, hidden in the shadows, Nathan Hunter observed it all. His sharp eyes followed Adamus's retreating figure, then shifted to the direction of the portal nearby. He crossed his arms, his face a mask of indecision. I could leave right now, Nathan thought, his gaze flicking between the two paths. None of these tough guys are here to stop me. The portal's wide open. But his thoughts returned to Adamus. This kid, Vajra, whatever his name is, he's different. Doesn't feel like the other so-called heroes I've met and worked with in the past. Nathan's fingers tapped against his arm as he mulled it over. Finally, he exhaled, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Well, kid, let's see if you're worth sticking around for. With that, he turned toward the direction Adamus had gone, his decision made.